Jonathan Lemire, we have some news, BBC breaking news. Blinken and Lavrov meet for the first time since invasion. You talked about that, but some of the details are coming out. I'm sure you probably have some of this, but U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told his Russian counterpart that the U.S. will support Ukraine for as long as it takes in a conversation that lasted around 10 minutes. Blinken also, as you said before, said he should release Paul Whelan and also talked about the arms treaty. But it is interesting that, again, the message is being delivered. We're in it until the end for Ukraine.
Yeah, so this is the G20 finance and foreign ministers meeting in New Delhi, India. They're the hosts this year. And it was not a formal meeting. The two men sort of just met on the sidelines. It was, as you said, about 10 minutes. But Secretary of State Blinken was able to deliver a few of the messages that his aides have said. He was keen to do so, that he sought out Lavrov, and they had this conversation. Lavrov, at least initial reports, made no commitment to anything, of course. And certainly, we had previously denounced U.S.'s continued support of Ukraine. So what remains to be seen is whether this will begin any sort of dialogue. But it is an interesting moment, Joe, in the war here, where last week, of course, we saw President Biden go to Europe, make that surprise visit to Kyiv, give that thunderous speech in Warsaw. But as much as almost a not celebration, but a commemoration of the Ukrainian resistance that was and the unity of that alliance, some hard days are ahead. The president said that. And there are some differing views within the alliance in Europe as to whether Putin should be offered any sort of off-ramp, whether or not, how much longer can this full-on support go. And the German chancellor comes to D.C. tomorrow. He'll meet with the president at the White House. And he's a key figure here in terms of trying to keep the Germans in line and pushing the support. We've heard Zelensky say Berlin should be doing more. Look for President Biden to press that case tomorrow, too.
Yeah, and Elise, I'm old-fashioned. I think you talk to your friends, you talk to people who consider the United States their enemies, and you keep that engagement open. So I'm glad that Blinken is talking to Lavrov. I hope Biden calls Xi. It is that sort of engagement may not play well wherever John Kennedy is putting on his phony cornpone accent. But then again, I think most people are smart enough to know it's better when we're talking. It's better even when there are misunderstandings. This is how you stop misunderstandings from becoming crises, from becoming wars. We have a war right now, but my gosh, I think it's very good that we're talking to Lavrov. I think it's very good that we're trying to start talking to China again because. Again, it's how you stop a dangerous situation from becoming a global war.
It's certainly a start, and the international community is going to have to start pushing a little bit harder for there to be some kind of peace negotiations to reach some kind of ground where the Ukrainians and the Russians can come to some kind of agreement or begin to start agreeing, because otherwise we're looking at another 2 years of trench warfare, and that's ultimately not going to benefit Ukrainian civilians who are caught in the middle of this, as much as I certainly would hate to cede any ground to Russia.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Mike, listen, we are most likely going to be seeing if what military experts on both sides of the Atlantic are saying, there's a possibility that we see trench warfare for the next 2 years. Nobody gaining, just a lot of people dying. And if that happens, we're exactly where we were in World War I, as far as 2-3 years of trench warfare. In that situation, nobody wins. Of course, U.S. policymakers will rightly say it is up to Ukraine. They were the ones who were invaded, and I completely agree with that. The question is, though, at what point is just the guarantee of U.S. protection moving forward, the guarantee of NATO by, let's say, even if it's not by NATO, but NATO by another name, and the existence, the protection of Ukraine as a nation going forward, when does that become enough?
Yeah, Joe, I mean, the word volatile is not to be misused here, because we have a volatile situation in Ukraine. We have a volatile situation in our relationships with both China and Russia. And isolation could be twinned with the word volatile. It's not good to be isolated from discussing these issues with the Chinese, with the Russians to a certain extent. So the meeting with Lavrov and Blinken, that's potentially promising, even though you hear from certain people who know far more about this than we do, that Lavrov's relationship with Putin is not what it was recently as a year ago or 2 years ago, but still a discussion is more important than anger and silence between the parties. And David Ignatius's piece today about the need to renew and restore a relationship with China between President Biden and President Xi, that's critical too. But the volatility and the Bunsen burner effect, the heat of the war in Ukraine, has to be lowered. That country has been destroyed. We don't want the world to suffer as well.